My name is Bobby Miller from Safety Speed Manufacturing in Mr. Miller's Woodshop. Today I want to talk about this project that we're building. We're making a cornhole set with Safety Speed Manufacturing equipment. I've got a 6480-20C machine behind me. We'll also use a screw pocket machine and a Y-belt sander. All these machines are manufactured right here in Minnesota. And these project plans set are going to walk you through each step of the way. We go through total construction framing on this project. They're well overbuilt pieces, but any construction class, any woodworking class that's interested in getting their hands dirty using these pieces of equipment should be a pretty good project for you. All right, so my first step here is going to be cutting down my 4-foot by 8-foot sheet of plywood. I've got that marked right here, so I can cut that right in the center. And now you're going to actually get 2 sets from one 4x8 sheet of plywood. So here's one reason why I like this panel saw, is that gravity is our friend, and so we're going to actually be able to make this rip cut now with my panel saw, but I need to pay attention to the wood grain lines on my sheet here. I just cut down my 4x8 sheet. I didn't even actually move this one, and so you can see that the wood grain is going this way, which for a rip cut, I want to be cutting that way. So like I said, gravity is going to be my friend. I'm going to tip this up now so that those wood grain lines are going up and down my piece. I've got a tape line here, which makes it really easy to get 2 identical parts. I've got 24 inches right there, and I've got 24 inches right there. I can trust now that this is going to be one accurate cut, straight dead center through my part, and now I have 2 sheets for my cornhole set. All right, so let's talk a little bit about framing right now. I'm gonna use some construction terms here that I just need all of us to be aware of what I'm talking about here, because I'm going off of the main cutting list on your woodworking plans here. And when I talk about rim joists, I'm talking about these long pieces right here. They happen to be 48 inches on our plans, the same length as our top piece. Okay, I've got another rim joist right here. You need to think in terms of building a set of these. So you're going to be making 2 of this entire apparatus for this build. So I've got 2 rim joists, which will actually mean 4 rim joists because I'm making them twice. And then I've got 1, 2, and 3 joist pieces. If we were building a deck or a floor on a building, this is the terminology that you'll need to have. So that's why I'm using them here. So I need 6 joists and 4 rim joists. Okay, all those dimensions are on your main cutting list of your plans. So what I'm going to do now is just with pencil and a tape measure, lay them out on my 2x4 boards so I can achieve exactly this. All right, so laying on our boards, I've got my tape measure, I've got my pencil, I've got my plans. I've also got a square. You can use a speed square, carpenter square, or I just happen to have this combination square that I really like. This is just going to help me make multiple straight lines across my board so it's easy to know where I'm cutting later. I've got 2 boards right here that I've fleshed up on the ends, so the ends are even right here. And that first piece that I need to cut is called the rim joist. It needs to be 48 inches long, so I'm going to make a mark at 48. Take my speed square, lay it over the top. And now with one mark, with one line right here, I've got 1, 2, 3, and 4 pieces that are going to be my rim joists. That's how you do that pretty quick. I can set these off to the side now because they're ready to get cut. If you remember, I need 6 joists, and if you've forgotten, they're on your plans. But I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to flush up the ends, take my tape measure, and these ones only need to be 21 inches long. I'm not making those numbers up. I'm grabbing them off of my plans. Same process there. Make a mark, take my square. There we go. We need to remember that that blade kerf is 1/8 of an inch. So when I stick my tape line down back on here, I'm gonna count for about 1/8 of an inch. Find 21 inches again. 21, yep, 21. Double check your measurements as you go. This is not the time to go fast. I'm going fast because I've done this a couple times, but if this is your first time, you want to take some time and take some care when laying out your boards before you go and cut up 5 2x4s, and now none of them are the right lengths. So I got 2, 4. Count for that blade kerf, 21 inches. Make sure I'm flush back up on the ends. Don't forget about that. And there I've got all 6 of my rim joists, all right? There, with only a few lines, I've made 10 pieces laid out. I'm also gonna need to do swivel legs and a leg support. Okay, I'm gonna wait on doing these because I wanna make sure once this thing comes together that it is a good snug fit so that these things can be stored. But right now I'm gonna cut out my frame pieces and you'll see what that looks like. So now typically cutting through our frame pieces, I'll say cut 1 piece at a time. However, on this panel side here, I'm gonna cut through 2 2x4s at once for those frame pieces. Now, a couple of things to note on that. You want good edges on them. This one's kind of chewed up, so I flipped that one up top. We don't want anything pushing down that could rock, or if you got a bowed board, you don't want that bow to cause any binding on your blade. Additionally, once I come all the way through this cut, I'm going to turn the saw head off before I bring it back through, because while it's unlikely, those top pieces may have shifted, and so I just want to avoid that. But here I'm getting 2 identical pieces out of 1 cut. All right, the next step in the cornhole set is to sand the face of our sheet right here. I'm gonna use a Safety Speed wide belt sander, but if you don't have one of those, or if you have something else, you can always do so by hand. But I really recommend getting those surfaces smooth so that finish will go on well and that the bags game will go off without a hitch too. So what I've done here to prep is I've taken a pencil, just a carpenter's pencil or a normal pencil, and I've put some lines on here. That's gonna be a graphite pencil. That graphite sits on top of that wood veneer. It's not going to be like a pen or a marker that penetrates through that veneer, because we don't want to sand through this veneer. We just want to sand it smooth, and removing that graphite is going to tell us when it ultimately is smooth. A couple things about this wide belt. I've got it set up with 220 sandpaper inside of here. I've installed the platen on this machine so at that bottom of the roller systems through here that sandpaper is traveling on is going to be ultra flat. It's going to give an ultra smooth finish and do a really good job. So I want to talk a little bit about turning this machine on. First and foremost, you need to have your electrical and your air connection. Okay, and make sure your air is giving the appropriate pressure to that machine. We've got a digital interface right here that's going to be illuminated once I turn this switch on. That also brings air to our machine. So now I've got tension in my belt right now. If I ever need to remove my belt, I need to take that tensioner off. But I want to turn the machine on, so I'm going to turn that to the on position. Now I'm also going to need dust collection, which is what I've got going back here. So make sure that that has been properly attached and you got the proper CFM for that. And then to start, you're just going to go straight down here. I'm not going to hit the reds, but I'm going to hit the green. That'll start the head. And the yellow, that's going to start my infeed belt. I can control the speed of that infeed right here. So if I want that sheet to feed faster, go to a higher number. If I want to slow it down, bring it down to a slower number. To turn it off organically, I want to hit the red buttons, the smaller red buttons. This lower one turns off my conveyor. This higher red button turns off the head in here. In an emergency situation, I can hit this off button, or this emergency stop right here as well will turn off that machine. But that's just a little bit about how to turn off and on that machinery. When I'm done using the machine for the day or for the session, I'm going to turn the air controls off so we're not putting any unreasonable force on our internal parts. So there you have it, the graphite is gone. This has been sanded ultra smooth. I don't see any graphite left on there, so that shows that this is a very square piece of wood. But if you did have any graphite left over, it's not the fault of the machine. It's probably because that board there has got some imperfections or some waves or some differences in thickness. And so take light passes on your sander so you're not removing that veneer. And if any of that graphite is left after one good pass through here, don't run it through again, just by hand. Go out and hit those high points, or I should say those low points on that board. But that's the next step for the cornhole set. All right, so now we're at the point where we're gonna put the top on our actual frame. Some things on this: the frame has been built, the top has been sanded. I need to put it on now where it's gonna be flush, or at least have equal offset all the way around. Okay, so I'm going to flush up my side first, come over to these edges, and all my measurements and all my cuts were accurate because every edge right now is square. All right, to put the top on, I'm going to need some tools to actually do that, and so I just want to walk you through what I'm going to need right now. First, I'm going to need safety glasses, so make sure you've got your safety glasses on. Next, I'm going to have an 1/8 inch drill bit in my drill. Be very careful putting this in the drill. Tighten it down so that this thing isn't going to move. On our drill settings, I need to be on the fastest setting as well as the highest number, or the drill bit setting if your drill has that. I'm going to go around all the way the edges on here, and if I remember right, the plans, I've got a hole for a screw on each corner and then filling in throughout each edge as well. But I just want to show you through what it's going to look like. I'm going to try and draw a middle line through that 2x4 so that I'm drilling through my top here and down into the center of my 2x4. That pilot hole is going to allow that wood not to split out because this is a hardwood top that I'm using. You can use other sheet goods for your top. You can even use a particle board or a laminate sheet too, but I like oak, so I chose oak. But I need to be pretty careful when I'm using that so that I'm not going to split out. I'm also going to use what's called a countersink. Okay, this is just going to open up the hole a little bit more so that when that screw goes in, the head of this screw doesn't split that wood, and it seats nicely into there so that that screw isn't sticking up when we play our bags game. All my drill settings can remain the same right here, and when I'm countersinking my hole right here, I'm going to go by eye, but I want to kind of visualize the cone of that screw, the head of that screw, and how deep I want that to penetrate in, which I just want it flush on the surface. Doesn't need to go down anymore. That's all the more it needs to be. I'm going to take out my countersink, put in my drive bit, and if you got more than one drill, it makes it a lot easier. Just a little pro tip. Because now I need to go back to the settings on my drill, drop that down to the lowest speed, and here I'm going to drop it even lower than I had it before. I'm going to drop down to the 10 spot right there. When I'm actually driving my screws, I'm going to make sure that this thing didn't shift at all, and I'm still flush all the way around, And I would recommend when you're doing this, do one corner and then do the opposite corner next. Try and feel for any shift. Once you feel that tension on that screw, stop. Okay, we're gonna put enough screws around here where this thing is not gonna go anywhere, that's for sure. Be sure to check that there's not any gap between your plywood and the 2x4 underneath. That's called a jack screw. We don't want to have that happen. It's not happening on mine. And so what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna production line this. I'm gonna go and drill a bunch of pilot holes all the way around, countersink each hole, and then drive each screw. All right, so now we're gonna make the layout lines for where the hole is gonna go on our cornhole. This is the actual cornhole where the bags are going to slide into, so it needs to be really accurate. And so, like always, I recommend you guys use a pencil when we're laying out our stuff. I'm gonna do a marker just for the sake of the video, but you wanna be very accurate for this. The first dimension we gotta know is dead center. And if you remember, these are 24-inch wide panels. So I'm gonna come over 12 inches, and I can do so with my tape measure. Snap a quick mark right there. And I'm gonna grab a straight edge. This could be as simple as a piece of wood, but I like that the speed square hooks around the corner so I can get an ultra square line for a cornhole set, okay? That's 12 inches from there and 12 inches from this edge as well. I also need to measure 9 inches down from the top. I'll say that again, 9 inches from the top. I'm gonna make a little line there. Take my straight edge, and now I'm gonna make an X of where I need to drill my hole. All right, for making our hole, there are a couple different options that I just wanna talk about. I strongly recommend using a hole saw. However, this is a tool that probably a lot of folks don't have. They sell them everywhere. And if you're gonna make a bunch of cornhole sets, I would recommend you go out and get a 6-inch hole saw. You'll need a couple other different tools for that. It attaches to a drill, and you'll also need a center punch and a hammer just to get that hole started. And I've got a video on how to actually do that. The other way too that most folks will have is utilizing a jigsaw. You'll need a couple things for that though. You'll need a way to make a perfect 6-inch circle for you to follow on your jigsaw, and you'll need a drill bit. And so I can drill a hole somewhere within that circle that it's going to get cut out for my bit to go in, and then make my 6-inch hole that way. Before I start and I use my hole saw, what I need to do is to just put a little divot in this wood right here, right where I put those crosshairs. Okay, I'm going to use my center punch for that. Find center. And just give a little hole for that bit to start in. That is a critical piece for us here to be successful, because these hole saws can really be a bear for us. But this bit right now is going to thread into that little hole that I just made, and I'm going to ever so carefully cut through this piece. Drill setting is on as high a speed as it goes, and on the drill bit setting itself. Hey, there we go. All right, using the jigsaw method to cut out your 6-inch hole, you're gonna need a few things. You're gonna need a means to draw a perfect 6-inch hole. You can use a protractor, you can use something else that's 6 inches. And please use a marker for this so that you've got a good thick line to actually see as you're cutting. There's gonna be a lot of sawdust that accumulates around that blade, so you just wanna see that thick marker for that. I've got a drill right here with a 3/8 bit, but really you just need a bit big enough for that blade to thread into to start your actual cut. Once we get through the final cut, you'll use a file or sandpaper to sand to that actual line that you drew. So what I'm gonna actually do is drill my hole inside this hole, and I'm actually gonna cut on the inside of my line. I'm not gonna cut into the good part of my board. If I do, I stop the machine, back it out, realign it, and then carry on my cut that way. I can set my jigsaw aside and just go around with my file now and clean that up, but I got pretty close. I'm pretty happy with that cut. If you've done it right, you start with 5 2x4s, you've got these 2 offcuts that are left, and 1 full 2x4. That'll be plenty for your swivel legs on both of these cornhole sets. So I want you just to double check your measurements between here. It should be 21 inches in between your 2 rim joists. Okay, if yours isn't, your measurements are going to be a little bit off from the plans. Mine are not, however, so I can follow what is written on the plans. And we didn't make these cuts on purpose before because anticipating maybe you did make a mistake somewhere along the way. I just wanted to make sure that we would actually have something that we could still screw pocket together and make a functional swivel leg for you here. So 21 inches, that's going to give me a swivel leg of 18 inches, because if I put 2 2x4s together like this, they don't actually equal out to 4 inches. These have been milled, so if I go and I measure these 2 2x4s stacked up together, that's actually only 3 inches, okay? So I need to take those into account because these are going to be my leg pieces right here. Leg support is going to go directly between here, and that's where I got that 18-inch reading. If you get anything different, then you need to cut that leg support to that dimension there. The legs pieces, those will always be the same length because we want that same rise off of those cornhole sets so that we get the correct angle to make a legal cornhole board. All right, so now we need to make the rounded cuts on our 2x4 legs. At this point, I have 4 of the legs that are all 11.5 inches long, and I've got those leg supports that are gonna go in between those legs later on. I'm not doing anything to those now, but for the legs, I'm gonna actually need to round these ends off so that they'll actually swivel inside the cavity of our cornhole set. You'll need to find something that is round, and I just happen to have my coffee cup here, and it fits on here perfect to where I can make a nice round radius tracing the cover of my coffee cup. If you want, you can get your protractor out. You can find some other lid that works that'll give you that rounded profile. This one doesn't need to be perfectly circular. This one just needs to be rounded enough so that it'll swivel that leg assembly inside of that cornhole set. All right, so I've got my lines laid out here. I've got my jigsaw plugged in and ready. I also want you to fix your piece to whatever bench that you're working on. I've got just a simple clamp right here. After I go and make my cut, I'm gonna sand that with an orbital sander, or disc or belt sander works. Even the file that we used earlier would work as well. Just so we get a nice smooth curve so that this thing is gonna glide when we move those swivel legs in and out. All right, we are going to assemble these legs now to our cornhole set with some specialty hardware. So we've got a carriage bolt, a washer, and a wing nut on here that are going to hold this whole assembly on here, and they're also going to be placed specifically so that it will be able to pivot down into the cornhole set for storage. How we're going to do that is we're going to take one of our legs here, clamp it to the piece so that it's all the way down and all the way up to this joist right here. From there, I'm just going to grab a 3/8 bit here. I'm going to center it on the 2x4. Okay, I'm going to come 1.5 inches up and 1.5 inches down on my 2x4. And I'm going to come 1.5 inches in through there. Then I'm just simply going to drive a hole all the way through. Now, I've got room for my hardware to work from the outside. Thread on my washer, my wing nut. There is our swivel joint right there. There's a little movement in that carriage bolt, but that's okay. It's going to allow that to swing up and down. Next step is going to be to add that support piece through here. All right, so the next thing we need to do, the last thing in fact that we need to do, is to add that leg support between our 2 legs. So it's important that you dry fit this first. Make sure that that leg support fits between the 2 legs that you just installed onto your cornhole boards. This support isn't going to add any extra weight bearing, but it's going to keep those legs together so that they're easy to function, and they'll actually kind of work as a storage compartment for your bags as well. We're going to use 2.5-inch screws for this, so we got to really think about the web of our screw pocket, and it's really kind of a challenging thing to adjust on some machines. On the Safety Speed 101 Easy machine, it really is easy to adjust that. It's just these 4 knobs right here, slide that fence back, and that's going to increase the distance of your web. There are other jigs that you can do some math and try and figure that web out for a 2.5-inch piece. For us, it's easy. There's a gauge right here that we utilize, and so I've just slid that fence back for me to make those pocket holes. I'm going to put 2 on each end, and that's what's going to hold this piece together inside of those 2 legs. All right, now is the home stretch where we're actually going to put our leg support into our piece. There's just a few things I want to make mention of. I want you to grab a scrap block 2x4. Here's the one I used from earlier. I'm going to set that down right above the hole inside the cavity of my cornhole set, and that's just going to help me get this leg support to be lifted off of that surface so that I'm more centered in that between those 2 legs. From there, it's as simple as making sure our drill is set. I'm going to go about the 10 speed and the lowest speed setting on my drill here. All right, moment of truth. Let's see if it folds. It does. It folds beautifully. Get my scrap block out of there. I have got 1 completed set of cornhole. All right, now that we've got these 2 pieces built, why don't we go outside and performance test them? If you enjoyed these plans, check out We've Got More. Hopefully you enjoy playing with them. If you would, check out Safety Speed. They got some amazing equipment here. We're playing right here outside their facility in Minnesota. Tag our Instagrams, our Twitter, YouTube, all that other stuff. At Safety Speed Manufacturing and at Mr. Miller's Woodshop.